It is the evening of June 18, 1815. Near the town of Waterloo, the most prominent political and military figure of the 19th century, Napoleon Bonaparte is desperately playing his last card for victory against the combined forces of the Anglo-Allied and Prussian armies. He moves the elite Imperial Guard forward. Yet, the Duke of Wellington's redcoats would not only repulse the Guard, but also the last hope of Napoleon to create a lasting empire. After a splendid victory, the Duke of Wellington describes the battle in one sentence. They came on in the same old way, and we saw them off in the same old way. Although it is a great summary of the Imperial Guard's last attack and a few more occasions in the battle, it might not sound understandable to the people who are not familiar with the Duke of Wellington's military career in detail. So, what the Duke exactly means by the same old way? The answer is the secret that enabled him to defeat the generals and marshals of La Grande Armée, and finally its master, Napoleon Bonaparte. At the beginning of the 19th century, the French unquestionably had the best army in Europe. This was no accident, but the fruit of a half a century of theoretical accumulation and practice. After the defeat of the 7 Years' War, which undermined the French prestige seriously, the kingdom gave a huge importance to the reformation and reorganization of the army. Seminal figures like Rochambeau and Comte de Joubert exerted many reforms in the army, ranging from the uniforms of the troops to their use in certain circumstances. During the early years of the French Revolution, the relatively young, dynamic, and able officer cadre of the French Republic inherited the theoretical heritage of those pundits to the full. Among these strategical and tactical maxims, one attracted almost the entire French general staff: l'ordre mixte. In an age the other armies in Europe were predominantly following linear doctrines, the revolutionary armies were deploying in a complicated structure. Behind a cloud of skirmishes, 2 divisions in column separated by a division of line. This system provided the French a flexibility to counter any movement of the enemy and play their own game. When it came to attacking the enemy forces, the French general staff used the mixed order effectively. They almost always favored an onslaught with bayonet charges instead of a line battle. This attitude was based on experience. In the late 18th century, an experiment organized by the Prussian army had revealed the accuracy rate of musket fire depending on the distance to the enemy ranks. The results were not appealing, and during an actual battle, those accuracy rates were obviously much lower. Hence, the French general staff preferred a shock assault system. In the following years, when he rose to power, Napoleon Bonaparte, although not really intervening in the minor tactical details, also favored the implementation of the mixed order. In a typical Napoleonic battle, the French army's breaking of the enemy would follow the incoming pattern. At the very beginning, the French guns would fire to inflict casualties on the enemy. Meanwhile, amidst the smoke of gunfire, the skirmishers would advance in front of the columns. By opening fire, they would give disconcerting moments to the enemy. This was followed by cavalry charges. Yet, these assaults were not aiming to break the enemy, quite the opposite, to force them to enclose themselves in squares. While the cavalry fought the enemy infantry, the French columns would get closer to the enemy squares. As the French cavalry withdrew, the columns would rush into the enemy. The unfortunate enemy, who is closed into squares, would not be able to stand against a sheer mass of French columns and would easily break. The effective usage of this pattern would give the French an uncontested supremacy against the other European powers, until the summer of 1808. Following the royal government's decision of intervening in the Spanish uprising against Napoleon's yoke, the British Expeditionary Army, under the command of Major General Sir Arthur Wellesley, is about to give their second battle on the Iberian soil after their victory at Rolizia. Led by General Andoche Junot, the French army prepares for an attack with their characterized l'ordre mixte. While it is hard to trace the dispositions of most enemy troops, the infantry columns advance duly, only to be confronted by a red wall suddenly. The British send volley over volley, and the French are about to be broken. Their divisional general orders them to redeploy in a line. Yet, as they are marching uphill, most of them are already exhausted and unable to do so. Eventually, they are broken. The day would witness more of such occasions, and the result would never change. In fact, the scene would repeat itself for the rest of the Peninsular War. The future Duke of Wellington, Sir Arthur Wellesley, was to see the end of this war of liberation as an undefeated general in major battles. On tactical scale, this was largely thanks to his correct measures to counter the French mixed order. When he was appointed to take command of the British Expeditionary Force in Spain before leaving his homeland Ireland, he talked to the Member of Parliament John Wilson Croker about what he was thinking of his new adversaries, the French. "I haven't seen them since the campaign in Flanders, when they were capital soldiers, and a dozen years of victories under Bonaparte must have made them better still. They have, besides, it seems, a new system of strategy, which has outmaneuvered and overwhelmed all the armies in Europe. This is enough to make one doubtful, but no matter. My die is cast. They may overwhelm me, but I do not think they will outmaneuver me. First, because I am not afraid of them as everyone else seems to be, and secondly, because if what I hear of their system of maneuvers is true, I think it a false one against steady troops." By claiming that, General Wellesley would prove ultimately right. He was a master of picking the most favorable ground to give a battle. He always preferred to fight on ground where enough reverse slopes existed, so he could utilize them. If the terrain was so, the French cavalry's effectiveness would decrease. Still, the most significant advantage of sitting on a reverse slope was to hide his deployment from the enemy, and to protect his men from the death-pouring fire of the French cannons. In many major battles of the Peninsular War, the French, unaware of where Sir Wellesley has concentrated his forces, advanced in mixed order. To prevent the approach of the French skirmishers, Wellesley often used light infantry. Then, as he felt the arrival of the right time, he ordered his men to confront the French. Deployed in two long lines, the British infantry would give a volley to the incoming French. Normally, it was an axiomatic behavior of the French to redeploy into line before applying the final stage of attacking the enemy. However, in addition to the exhaustion of marching on a high ground, the sudden appearance of the British infantry would almost always make it impossible. In this circumstance, after the volleys of the red lines, the French infantry would mostly break. Approximately 1 year after the end of the Peninsular War, the exiled Emperor of the French, Napoleon Bonaparte, escaped the island of Elba and reclaimed his throne. In his last campaign at the Battle of Waterloo, he would throw his guard onto the British at the most critical juncture of the battle. The Duke would once more implement what he has done in Spain, to hide his force behind the reverse slope and await for the approach of the enemy. Once the Imperial Guard was near, Wellington ordered his men to fire. Unable to resist against the pressure from three sides, the elite Imperial Guard would break, and this would escalate to the whole French army, ending Napoleon's dreams decisively. And this is how Wellington defeated Napoleon. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up and share. See you on the next one.